Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfisherinsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at flyfisherinsiderpodcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Today our guest is Jen Ripple. Jen is the editor-in-chief of Done Magazine. Done Magazine is both an online and print magazine that focuses on conservation, travel, and techniques in fly fishing for women by women. Done Magazine has a long history in the industry and is often considered a trailblazing women's publication. Done has broken the rules and gone all out. Here today to tell us more about Done is Jen Ripple. Jen, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. Super excited that you're here, Jen. I want to jump right into it because there's a ton of topics we want to get onto today. So before we talk about Done, why don't we tell me a bit about yourself and your history in fly fishing?
Yeah, sure. So I currently live in Tennessee, but I was born in Wisconsin, grew up in the Midwest, and there's no trout there, and I didn't grow up fishing at all. I lived on a lake but never fished. And I was in my 30s when I was working at the University of Michigan and took a fly tying class one winter when it was really, really cold and there was nothing else to do. And so from that moment, I walked in the fly shop and fell in love with everything that's fly. And then as soon as the ice was off the river, the Huron River, which runs through the campus of the University of Michigan, I just spent every day almost in the water teaching myself to fish. And so I kind of started out backwards, tying flies first and then going into fishing. And it's just been a black hole ever since then.
Awesome. I love that. Jen, I want to talk a bit about like when you fell in love with fishing and that's Northern Michigan. Is that correct?
It's actually Southern Michigan.
Southern Michigan. Okay. So you're up in Michigan, you're in college, and then you just used to go out like on the weekends in your spare time. Like walk me through that a bit.
Yeah, so I was not in college. I was actually working there at the Kellogg Ice Center. And no, I was actually not in school. Took a job working at the Kellogg Ice Center. And, it was a really, really cold winter. And I had, post-divorce, was looking for something to do and found this fly tying class. And so, back then, I'm not a very artsy type person at all. Like I don't paint, I don't crochet, I don't do any of that at all. I'm not artistic in any way. And so I didn't really know what a fly tying class was, but it sounded intriguing. And to be honest, it was really cheap. It was like 8 classes for $65. And I thought, well, I'll go see what that's like. Yeah, I just fell in love with everything. It just became my life. It was like a black hole. I could not wait to get out of work to go throw my waders on and jump in the river and fish for bass.
Here you are, you're fully immersed into fly tying. Was there any early day struggles that you had in fly fishing as a beginner?
Yeah, I think in Michigan, even though like Trout Unlimited started in that area and there was the Michigan Fly Girls, I didn't know any of them and I had not heard of them at that point at the beginning. And so I felt that women were new to the sport and I felt kind of uncomfortable in the river. I didn't see any other women that were fishing. They were just dudes that were out on the river. And so I felt like, being new to the sport as a woman and personally was kind of a hindrance. I didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't really have any women that I could ask. And it was really intimidating. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I overcame as a new angler. Since then, obviously, I've done an exhaustive search and I speak on the history of women in fly fishing and know that women are not new to the sport. But back then I didn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. On the river, you're doing your thing. When did you have that aha moment to create the magazine?
Well, I had been fishing for maybe 2 years when I moved back to the Chicago area from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And there was a little fly shop that was right in the area that I was moving to, and they had a fly tying class. And so I took that. And the guy who was leading that fly tying class, he had just started a Midwest fly fishing magazine, which was just online. And it was called a Tight Loop magazine. And at that time, I was writing a blog that was not fishing related. And he had heard about it and asked me if I wanted to write a woman's column for a Tight Loop magazine. And I said yes. And so I started writing that.
Hmm.
And it became a very double entendre kind of column where I would do articles like the sex hatch and 8 inches and all this kind of like funny kind of writing. But I really wanted to write for a woman's magazine because I really like to write and I wanted to write something of substance. And so I looked around for a magazine and there just wasn't one. So I went back to the editor of A Tight Loop magazine and said, what do you think about me starting a woman's fly fishing magazine? To which he said, there's got to be one already. And so I challenged him to go look for one and he couldn't find one either. So that was June of 2013. And by September, we had our first magazine.
Crazy. Wow. So you've got what's that, like 5 years, 6 years history?
It's 6 years. We're in our sixth year.
6 year. Wow. So what was this like? When did it become real for you, Jen? Like you're writing, your editor says, yeah, okay, like let's do this. And you're creating this magazine. When did it like sink into you and you're like, wow, I'm actually doing this. This is going to be the only publication out there at the time. And what was that like? Like walk me through that.
Yeah, so I've owned a number of different businesses. I come from a very long line of entrepreneurs. And so once you've owned your own business, I had my first business at 21. And so once you've owned your own business, you make a terrible
Hmm.
employee. So you have to work for yourself.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and so it wasn't, for me starting the magazine, it felt real right from the moment that I realized I was going to do it. I'm not one of those people that has these ideas and then sits on them and thinks about all the negative things that you should do. I'm kind of more like the type A, like, okay, whatever the barriers, I don't know what they are, and it's probably better I don't, so I'm just going to go for it. And so from that moment, it became real. But I think, as much as I feel like the digital magazine, so we were digital for the first couple of
Hmm.
years, and that was on purpose. But the more I think about it, that was a real magazine for me, but it never became so real as when I actually held our first print magazine in my hand and was like, oh my God, we really have a real magazine now. Because even though it was real before, and I don't want to diminish the articles and stuff that we had before it became print because they're
Yeah.
fantastic, there was just something about the tactile experience of holding it in your hand or walking into Barnes and Noble and
Exactly.
seeing it on the
I
shelf.
completely
That,
agree with what you're saying.
yeah,
Completely
that's
agree.
great.
I mean, the subscription aspect of it, or you walk, like you said, you're out on the street and you see it. It's just, yeah, it's such a different feeling altogether, right? No,
Yeah.
I do know what you mean. When you created the magazine, was the focus at the beginning of the magazine, was it always the same as where it is now? And tell me a bit about what that focus is.
Yeah, so our focus has always been to empower women, and our tagline is empowering women, not ignoring men. Because I think that men get a really bad rap in women's fly fishing sometimes because of the very vocal minority of men who say things that are not quite positive about women in the sport. But I think that those are very small minded men and very few in between.
Hmm.
The vast majority of men, I think, want to see our sport succeed and they want to get women involved, right? And so for me, when I look at the sport of fly fishing and getting involved in getting men and, getting women involved in our tagline, it's always been really about empowering women in the sport. And for me, our focus has never changed. And so we tell the everyday angler story, which is different than anywhere else because we don't really employ or ask for professional writers to regurgitate the same stories you've seen. We want the third person kind of your experience because I think that in order to empower someone, at least for me, in order for me to feel empowered, it needs to be something that I feel is tangible in my own life. And telling a great story about a beautiful steelhead caught in BC by a professional angler, while that's a fantastic story and a
Hmm.
fantastic article, it doesn't make the everyday angler feel like they can do that. But if you hear the story of a young girl, for example, who fished with her dad or her dad wanted her to fish with him and she never went out with him and then he died. And while she was in the grieving process, she was going through his things and found his fly gear and worked her way through the stages of grief with her dad's fly rod. Well, that's something that all of us can actually relate to. Or a story like, someone who goes to Ecuador on vacation and picks up a fly rod for the first time and catches a beautiful trout. well, that seems like maybe fly fishing isn't that difficult and it's not that hard then, and that maybe that's something I can do too. To me, that's empowering. And I think that our mission from the beginning has always been empowerment, and I think it remains the same today.
Well, Jen, just that the little intro that you were telling me that hit me emotionally as well. So it's kind of funny how that is. So I agree with the empowering. It's a great focus to have. So with that said, though, what are some of the roadblocks you guys faced earlier on? I mean, you must have had some challenges. I mean, over the 6 years of being in the magazine industry here, what are some of the, like I said, the roadblocks and challenges, and how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah, so I think that, we had a great audience even in our first year. But getting the manufacturers to recognize the magazine and recognize then again women as a force in the industry was really hard. So I think that that was the hardest part. Women jumped on board and men too, and were interested in the magazine. We offered it for free for a very long time, and our digital content is still free because I wanted to get the word out
Hmm.
there, right? And that was a cheap and easy way to do it and to build a community. But finding the companies to jump on board and actually advertise was hard. And I think they were looking for longevity. They wanted to make sure that we weren't just something that was
Yeah.
fly by night and we were just going to be there and then gone before they put their stock behind us. And so I think that was the hardest part. And for us, it was looking back, I got really lucky. I had always intended the magazine to just be digital because back 6 years ago, everyone was saying that print was dead, right? And so for me, doing the magazine online digitally was just really, really smart. I got really lucky because it allowed us to be able to offer the magazine for no cost, and it allowed us to get our content out there and grow our audience, so that after a couple years, when I would get emails on a weekly basis saying, where can I buy your magazine? When are you going to put out a print magazine? We already had the audience. And so by the time we actually had our print magazine come out, we had an audience that already wanted to buy it. And that was, in hindsight, really, really a smart way to go about it, even though I feel like we got more lucky than smart.
Yeah, fair enough. How, like, I want to touch base about, you mentioned about the bigger brands, or the brands trying to advertise, and that's obviously come full circle now. Like they do advertise in your magazine heavily.
Mhm.
So what were some of the challenges? Like, why do you think, like, let's get more in depth on that. Why do you think they were hesitant? Was it just because of it's a women's magazine, or do you think it's because like the longevity, like you said? Like, what were some of the reasons they were saying?
I think it was, there were a number of reasons. So, first of all, I think it was a women's magazine, and they didn't know that there was actually a big contingent out there of women who were legitimate anglers. Since then, we've obviously proved that wrong. And back then there wasn't a lot of gear for women. There weren't a lot of companies that were actually making something that was tailored for women. Because they didn't recognize the women as a valid audience yet. And so there was nothing that they could really offer us. What are they going to offer us? Ill-fitting waders.
Hmm.
No woman is going to want to wear those, right? But then, I think too, there was some of that good old boys club in the advertising market with the big companies. Looking back on it, it was kind of like, Patagonia's been advertising with Joe Blow down the street for a very long time, and they advertise with him, and they're not willing to take ad dollars away from them because they go to Joe's ranch once a year with their family, and they stay overnight there, and they know them personally, right? So they're not going to take
Hmm.
money away from the pockets of their friends in order to put it into something else that's brand new, even if we could prove to them that we had a very valid audience. And I use Patagonia as a company, but that was not them. Okay, so let's just like not say that I'm singling out Patagonia. I'm using them as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
But
absolutely. No, I
you
know
know,
what you mean.
yeah, but that being said, I mean, that's legitimate, right? I mean, we all do that. We all have, it's all about who you know and not what you know to some extent. And so I think after a while, we just became such a force that they couldn't ignore us anymore, or they couldn't ignore the fact that they were missing out. And so I think it takes longevity, right? It just takes showing people that you are absolutely legitimate, that you're not going anywhere, and then they're willing to put their money behind you.
Absolutely. You know, Jen, it's funny because, like, here we are 6 years later, and again, I'm going to use Patagonia just as a company, but there's so many other brands out there. Women's waders, women's boots, women's this 50-50 on the world. There's so much out there, and how it's come, and it's come so far. And it's funny because, like I say, I interview a lot of brands, and one of the things that I'm most happy about is the women's products that are out there, and I think you can agree is like they're not pink, they're normal, they're like they're specific for the industry, and they match and they work, right? So here we are. It's really come full circle in that degree. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, no doubt. And it's funny when I do my, when I talk about the history of women in fly fishing, I look at in the last 6 years, and there are so many companies that are owned by women or women specific in the fly fishing industry that did not exist 6 years ago. And it's so exciting to see
Hmm.
them not only creating women creating these companies that are fly fishing women specific, but then succeeding and not only succeeding, but like overachieving and becoming so successful. And so that's super exciting to see. And I think that it's like the snowball effect now. The more that women have gear that's going to fit them and they're going to feel comfortable in their skins on the waters, the more women are going to get involved in it. And the more that they see women involved in the sport, the more women are going to want to be involved in the sport. And it's just this giant snowball that has just been so exciting for us to sit here, and for me specifically to sit here and watch happen. I mean, I can't even imagine going back 6 years and what it was like, because the whole industry of fly fishing has changed so much.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's changed for the positive. However, with that said, I want to ask you, what are some of the social media aspects that the magazine has taken, like a step towards that the magazine has done? What your purpose is, or what you guys are trying to portray on social media as well? How has that been working out for you guys?
Yeah, so that we could talk all day about the positive, whether social media has been positive or negative for women in fly fishing, right? But I find that we could not have grown our magazine without
Correct.
it. And I think that when you look at the overarching aspect of social media, it's been nothing but good for women in our sport. It's shown other women that there are women out there that are doing fly fishing, that love fly fishing, that you can be you can look like a woman and fly fish, right? You can dress as girly or as non-girly, if that's a word, as you want, as long as you're comfortable in your own skin on the water. And I get asked all the time what I think about the women who might not be legitimate on social media, who have 100,000 followers. And there was a woman who really impressed me. She's actually a hunter, not an angler. Her name is Jules McQueen, and I had the opportunity to sit next to her at an event, and I asked her. I just kind of like to ask people their ideas of social media and women, because we all get, regardless of what outdoor experience you're in, we all get as women the same kind of questions. Well, do you like the women out there that are dressed in a
Hmm.
bikini and whatever? And she said something that was so profound, and I've since really come to see the wisdom in her words. And she said, I think that longevity is what's going to show the people who are legitimate from those who are not on social media. And she said, the more that I think about it, if that one woman, let's just say there's one woman angler out there and she's completely not legit, that she's never caught her own fish, that she wears a bikini all the time, that she's got 100,000 men followers, whatever. If that woman gets one other woman involved in our sport, then I'm all behind her. And so, with that being said, I look at social media as this, you can either make it positive or you can make it negative, right? And so, here at Dunn, we choose to make it a positive experience. We choose to only uplift people on social media. We only choose to show what we want on social media. We don't buy into people that are posting things that are negative or negative comments. There's a little button on social media for people that complain about what they don't like on it. There's a little button. It's called unfollow. Just do that, right? You don't have to complain or fight or say negative things. That's just bad fishing karma. Nobody needs or wants that. So, that's what I take about social media. And I just choose to look at it and say, if we hadn't had social media or the internet, we would never be the magazine we are today, because there would be no way we could even reach the audience we have. So for that, we're thankful.
Jed, I think for once you took the words right from my mouth. I'm actually speechless. You summed that up so nicely and in such a classy, positive way that I think I'm going to leave that subject alone. For definitely, you did that in a good way. But you know what? I do notice again, just on social media and through your website and stuff, that you guys are so actively involved in charity and events. And like you said earlier, that you met someone at an event. Can you tell us about some of the events that you're involved with personally, like that Dun Magazine's involved with personally, and some of the
Yeah.
that you guys are looking forward to doing?
Yeah, sure. So we at the magazine, we every year we commit to 100 volunteer hours in conservation
Sorry,
efforts. So,
is
and
that
that's
each
not something
person or is that like a combined total?
as a magazine, that's combined total.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and that's not something that we tell a lot of people because that's just something that we do just because that's just good
Hmm.
karma. And we believe in karma here in the office. But some of the things that I love, obviously, Casting for Recovery, everyone is involved in Casting for Recovery, but that's because it's such a great place to get involved. Uh, you know, Giving back in such a powerful way when you can actually visibly see women's lives being changed when they step in the water is just something that you just never forget. And then, there's a group called the Mayfly Project, and we love the Mayfly Project. Caitlin Barnhart and Jess have done such an excellent job at getting children who are in foster homes and who are in orphanages out onto the water. I mean, that's just great karma. And then, we do a lot of local stuff that is river cleanups and volunteering our times to help at the local level on our high schools and in our grade schools and with vets and all of that kind of stuff. So we are involved in so many different ways. But I think that's what makes us so diverse is there are just so many opportunities to get involved and help and clean up this world and make it a better place that anyone who doesn't do that, I can't even understand them.
Jen, where do you get your inspiration from? As a leader, it sounds like you just have such this great team around you in this orb. So you must have this great inspiration that you just keep bringing to the industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, what inspires me every day, what gets me into the office every day is the emails that I get from men and women alike who say, I love your magazine. It's just gives a different voice. And I had one man write me in early on and he sent me an email and he said, "Yeah, a friend of mine just forwarded me your website and I was reading your magazine and it's got such a different feel to it. Why is that?" And I sent him an email back and I said, "Did you notice that all of the articles were written by women?" And he said, "No, I never noticed that, but that is a really good point." We just bring a different the women that write for us and our audience is just such a delightful, enlightening, positive audience that they inspire me every day. And early on when I worked at a Tight Loop magazine, I became the executive editor for a Tight Loop, and I would deal with all the authors, which were 99.9% male. And then I would deal with the women authors from Done, which are 99.9% female. And I always say that the difference between those two types of anglers and the difference in just male and female differences, right?
Hmm.
And I'm speaking on generalities, but and stereotypes, but stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. And it's like this. It's like you have a baby and I say to you, "Oh my God, your baby is so cute. And look at all that hair. And oh my God, it's just so great to see, how much did she weigh?" And then that's like dealing with my Done authors. And then dealing with the Tight Loop authors where it was always like, "My baby's bigger than your baby. My baby has more hair than your baby. And so it's just such a different kind of environment that I sit myself in every single day dealing with these women who just want to tell their stories because they just want to encourage another woman to get involved. And that makes a huge
No,
difference.
it sounds like it, Jen. It sounds like you've really created a nice little niche and like little area over there at Done for yourself and for the women that you closely work with. What are some of the goals you guys have going forward?
Oh, we have a lot of goals. So I think that you'll see in the not too distant future another magazine come out. So
Women's only or
it will be a a woman focused magazine, but not women only. Like for instance, Done is not only women, but it is focused on women. So the same kind of concept.
you're absolutely right. Poor choice of words on my behalf.
No, not at all. And then, so we're working on that. And then I work together closely with Heather Hodson
Yes.
from United Women on the Fly. And we have developed something called Rip and Hopper's Adventure. And so we're doing our second road trip, which will be fishing for redfish from Florida all the way through New Orleans. And we are actually going to be in New Orleans on Halloween. And so we are really excited about that. We're having a bunch of different women's events where women can come and learn and take a lesson or come fish with us and stay with us along that road trip. So that's something that we're really, really excited about as well.
Can you tell us a bit more about this event? Like, can women get involved with this event or participate in this event that you just mentioned?
Absolutely. We want them to. So we are starting out in Homosassa Springs, Florida on October 20th. And from there, we are driving through Florida, fishing for redfish, and then fishing like the canals and that kind of stuff along the way. Not for redfish, but for whatever. We're going to have our first big event in Homosassa, where women can come and fish with us. And then we're going to ask women, whoever wants to, can actually caravan with us along the rest of our road trip. We're going to fish through Louisiana, through Alabama, and then we're going to fish into New Orleans, Louisiana part, ending in New Orleans, where we're going to stay at a campground and hoop it up on Halloween in New Orleans. And then we're going to actually tell the story. Heather and I are going to tell the story of New Orleans and the fishery that is there since the hurricane that came through. Because I think, I have friends that live there. We all know of the horror that happened.
Mhm.
We all know about the horror that happened in New Orleans at that time, and the lack of what has happened to help that area since then. We hear so much about the foreign hurricanes that come through, and we hear all the time about how we send people over to help people in foreign
Mhm.
countries, as we should. That's just part of being an American. But at the same time, people in our own country and the fisheries that are there, there were a lot of people who lost not only their houses, but people lost their lives. They lost loved ones.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
fishery has been devastated, and what have we done to actually bring that back? And so it's our hope that we bring focus there, and that Heather and I can reinvigorate the fishery, and the little small part that we could play to help bring some revenue back to that area is something that we want to bring full force. And we're asking anybody, men, women, to come and meet us in along the road trip, but to meet us in New Orleans, where we can really make an impact on that society down there.
Jen, I love your energy. It's just, you're selling me on it. I want to go and like podcast on this road trip with you guys. It just sounds like such a
Well,
great.
come on along.
It sounds
Come
like
on along.
I do. I want to just like live podcast it. It sounds so amazing, and you're really selling me on that. So I just hope I want to make sure that I get all the details right on that, so that we can announce that as well in our show notes. Because I do really want women to get involved with what you guys are creating there. It sounds just like such a great opportunity for someone. So, but what are some other ways women could get involved with the magazine after recently hearing this story?
Yeah, so you could tell us your story. Everyone has a story, and as small as you think your story is, it can be empowering to another person. It can empower that one person to pick up a fly rod, and it can change someone's life. I've had people say, well, fly fishing isn't, brain surgery. And yeah, it's not. But you know what? I've seen it change lives just like brain surgery has. And for me, giving someone the gift of fishing, the gift of stress relieving, the gift of a passion for the outdoors is just something that, cannot be understated. And so any woman out there, and we take articles from men as well. They have to be certain special articles that really touch me in a certain way, but we do that. We are not discriminatory in that way. But everyone has their own personal story, and it is going to touch someone's life. And that's why I love to tell the everyday angler story, because there's something about each story. It's so different and yet so the same. And you can feel the passion in their words because it's their story. They tell it. And I feel so fortunate every single time that someone gifts me with their story and entrusts to me the ability to tell their personal story. And that's what I want. I want women out there to know that you can do it. And I also think, on a bigger note, a lot of us feel like we can't teach someone or bring someone else to the river until we've fished for X amount of years, or we know all the knots, or we know all the different casts, or our cast is perfect. And that's so not true. Every one of us, if we've been on the water one day longer than someone else, we have something to teach. No one's looking for perfection. And I think that gets lost a lot when we see the perfect loop, or everybody talks about the perfect loop, or you know what? More often than not, I don't make a perfect loop. And guess what? The fish do not care. It's okay. My close friends, they call me the flamingo because I'm always standing on one foot while I'm trying to unwind the line from around my other leg, right? While I'm trying to cast. It's okay. It's okay to get caught in a tree. It's okay to fall in the river. It's okay to not make the perfect cast. You know, this is fishing, right? Fly fishing is fishing, and fishing is supposed to be fun. And I think that that's what I want women and men out there to know. You have something to offer. You have something to offer our audience. You have something to offer us, and you have something to offer the world just by getting out there and getting someone else involved.
Jen, I love how authentic you are and authentic with the listeners about, hey, I don't make the perfect cast, or I am a flamingo, or my friends call me a flamingo, and how you've created this, for Done, like Done has created this safe space for whether you're a pro or a pro staff, or you're a novice and it's your second hour fly fishing. You guys have created that safe environment, a safe place where everyone can come together. So I definitely like that. What would you say your biggest takeaway from all this has been so far?
Oh, you mean as far as the magazine or the industry in general?
Everything that
My biggest
your years of being in the industry and the magazine and everything you've come to learn.
Yeah, so I think my biggest takeaway is that the water seeks its own level. So meaning that fly anglers, for the vast majority of the part, are good people. They just want to enjoy the sport. They just want to get more people involved. And I can't, if I were to take one thing away, if I were to walk away from this right today, I would take away the fact that I have so many great friends now that I have created, and I mean, not created, but that I have, made
Hmm.
through fly fishing. That, I mean, that's my biggest takeaway. They're my biggest
Hmm.
gifts, are the people that I met along the way, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as well. I totally agree with you. Through the podcast, we've had so many new friends, and it's just like you said, it just snowballs. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely. Jen, really quickly, and I know you're all about empowering. What advice would you give any listener out there that might be sitting on the side thinking, "Hey, I'm going to start a magazine, or I'm going to start a business in the fly fishing industry, or creating their own niche within this industry that we love so much." What advice would you have for that person?
You mean besides don't give up on your day job? No. um,
Correct.
yeah. So, I would say just go for it. I think that if you have a passion and you have a desire to do something, don't let anyone stand in your way. When I first was going to come out with my first digital magazine back in September of 2013, right before it was about to go to press, go out online, I met with a friend of mine who I really, really respect. And he's been in the industry probably 50 years. And he said to me, Jen, that's a great idea. And I'm sure that your magazine is going to be fabulous, but you will only have one edition because there are not enough women out there that fish. And I never thought twice about what he was saying. I knew he was wrong. I just knew. And I just
Hmm.
let it roll off my back. And so I think, regardless of what industry you're going to get into, when you're starting to think about doing something new that's never been done, or maybe redoing something that's already been done, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get someone who's going to say to you, "Oh, it's great, but it probably won't last." And it's all up to you whether it succeeds or not. You have to have that passion. You have to have that drive. You have to be able to persevere through through the difficult times in order to see it succeed. And it's sheer willpower sometimes. There are days when I would wake up and be like, what in the world am I doing? Why am I doing this? I could make a lot more money just getting a job at the hospital like I used to have, right? So for me, it's all about your passion. If you're passionate about it, I say that what you're supposed to do in the sport will actually come to fruition. I see a lot of people that want to get into fly fishing nowadays to get in the industry. And I don't know if that's maybe to get free gear, to get on a pro staff or whatever, but I think that you're doing it backwards if you're looking at it like that.
Yeah.
The people that I see that succeed in fly fishing or in any sport minded business, it's always started with a passion for just that sport for no other reason than they just loved it. And then from that point, something has been born out of it. And so if there's a listener out there and they want to start getting into the fly fishing business in whatever sport, in whatever way that might be, I say spend more time in the water, spend more time fishing, spend less time thinking about what your business is going to be and how much you want to get involved in the industry, and just continue to fish and build up this love for the sport that you're in, and something will grow out of that. It can't help but grow out of that if that's what your passion is.
True enough, Jen, for sure. Jen, I always I have to ask my guests the one question. The one question is, which is the one thing you would change within the fly fishing industry?
I would change the way that anglers treat each other online. Without a doubt, I would just get rid of all the people out there that say negative things or think that they're experts on something when they're really not. If, like I said before, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It does us no good as an industry, as fly anglers, to get more people out on the water. And that is our goal, right? To get more anglers involved in our sport so that we can conserve the fisheries, so that more people fall in love with the waters around them and want to conserve them for future generations. And when you see this bickering and this fighting and all of this negativity that's online, just take a step back and get out of it. No, that does no one any good. So if I could change one thing, it would be that, the negativity that is in our sport, because again, this is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and the listeners will know this is a common trend. This is said by a lot of people that I interview, and quite recently, it seems to be the common trend. So, Jen, before I let you go, do you have anything for our listeners today?
You mean as far as something I could gift them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You betcha.
Yeah. So if they subscribe to our magazine, it's a quarterly publication, and you get 4 magazines: spring, summer, fall, and winter. If you get a subscription, you're already getting half off the cover price. But for your listeners, if they use the code fly_fishing_insider, all capital letters, they will get an additional 10% off a subscription.
Perfect. I'll definitely make sure I put that in the show notes. And Jen, where can we find you at?
You can find me online at dunnmagazine.com. You can email me at Jen, Jen, at dunnmagazine.com. And Dunn is spelled D-U-N, like the mayfly, not D-O-N-E. So D-U-N magazine. And you can look us up on social media under Dunn Magazine, or personally, Jen Ripple.
Awesome. Jen, I've had such a great conversation. I want to thank you today, and as well as I want to thank the listeners as well. Jen, thank you.
Thank you very much.